The interesting thing about this is it's not entirely uncommon. Olivia, talk to us about when either Kim Jong-un or his father, Kim Jong-il, have disappeared from public for a while for health reasons and kind of how this is similar to some of those other instances.
Well, my colleague Bruce Klinger, who is the former CIA chief for Korea, says that the intelligence community calls North Korea like the hardest of the hard targets because it is so difficult to get accurate information. And there's such high demand for information about North Korea, but such a deficit of reliable outlets to find that information that you often have a rumor mill. And as you were referencing, Jeff, this is not the first time that this has happened. Even in, Kim Jong Il's case, which is Kim Jong Un's father, when he passed away, the U.S. intelligence community, the South Korean intelligence community, the entire world did not know for 2 days that he had died. And so these types of speculations happen because we actually don't know. We don't have reliable sources inside of North Korea in order to know whether or not the leader of the country has died. And so it's not unusual for there to be speculations like this. There were speculations also about Kim Jong il before he died. And there have been speculations also about Kim Jong un. I mean, he doesn't appear to be in good health. We know that he has heart disease. We know that he is overweight. He's a 30-year-old and he is 5'7" and he weighs over 300 pounds. I know that's kind of stating the obvious, but there are a lot of indicators that are not in his favor in terms of his long-term health. And so
Is there a chance that he contracted coronavirus? I mean, that's the first place that my mind went to when I saw the news.
I also wondered whether or not he contracted coronavirus, or some have even speculated that he's just going into quarantine or social distancing like the rest of us around the world. And one of the things that came out was a 38 North report that said that they saw activity around the Wonsan beach resort that the Kim family owns. And there's some speculation that Kim Jong un is there. But there are some really odd things about this situation. These rumors have been circulating now for, I think, over a week. And normally you would see some sort of response from the North Korean media. And the North Korean media is the way that the US and the intelligence community found out about Kim Jong il's death. But there's been no response from North Korean media to show any pictures of Kim Jong un, which does seem very odd. So I think that
Right,
it's
right.
likely that there's some sort of health episode that took place, but whether or not that's some sort of heart episode, whether he's in a coma or a vegetative state or he has COVID-19, I
Right.
think, we can't be certain until we're told by the
Right.
North Korean media.
Right. Well, this is one of the things that's so interesting here because as I've just been reading lots of articles and a couple different reports about the Kim family and the different ways that Kim Jong Un has handled the spotlight compared to how his father and his grandfather handled it. When Kim Jong Un disappeared in 2014, the North Korean media and I guess their like press office within the supreme leaders world sent out some news headlines that he was having an ankle surgery, and then he resurfaced a month later and he had a cane, and that was really unique because Kim Jong Il, when he had a stroke in 2008, they didn't say anything. And so it's this weird moment of like, okay, is he going back to like how his dad used to be secretive about health things? Well, that's not really keeping in line with how he was about another health issue that he had. So it's really fascinating. And Olivia, I'm glad you also mentioned that 38 North report because I've got it pulled up here and just find it absolutely fascinating that this think tank knows what the Kim family train looks like from satellite images and have been tracking it. And it's just like, it's fascinating to me that this is how in 2020, we're having to rely on satellite imagery to understand the movements of a world leader. I mean, it's both fascinating and it also, it's also kind of like, you could call it a bird's eye view, but you could also think about how God watches over the events of man. And it's almost, as I look at these satellite images, it's almost a reminder of like, sure, there's all of this myth and propaganda built up over decades and decades. And I do want to talk about that a bit more, about the theology in North Korea around the Kim family, that has led to just these massive abuses of state power. But yet when you see it from these satellite images, you see this, this villa that he has and his train and all of that. And you just think the heart of the king is like a stream of water in the Lord's hands. And like there's just this kind of really humbling aspect of like he can hide from the rest of us, but like he can't hide from the Lord. And I think that's going to be something that we as Christians, need to think about when we think about dictators and authoritarians. And there's this interesting aspect of looking at these satellite images. So Olivia, let's work through the three different scenarios that could come from this. And there's this article in Foreign Policy that I'll link to in the show notes called Three Scenarios for Kim Jong-un's Mysterious Absence. And I think it's really helpful to kind of understand what could happen next. So the first is that Kim reappears in full control. Olivia, how would that happen? And how do you think the United States, and particularly our allies there in the region, most notably, obviously, South Korea, how would they handle, Kim reappearing? Maybe it happens today before this episode even publishes, or maybe it happens, this weekend or something like that. How would we handle that if he just reappears?
I think if Kim reappears, I almost think that that's what South Korea is expecting, because you've seen from South Korean media and even from, the highest levels, even Moon Jae-in saying, we're not noticing any unusual activity in North Korea. We fully believe that Kim Jong-un is totally fine. So I think they would almost expect that. And I think life would sort of return to normal levels of tension. And this is something that I've really been thinking about a lot, which is that even if he dies, but of course if he's just alive, we should expect more of the same from North Korea. And US policy at the end of the day has to be rooted in fact, not based on rumor or conjecture. And the fact of the matter is that North Korea continues to possess missiles, continues to have a rogue nuclear program in violation of international law. And that's why they have so many sanctions on them. And they continue to abuse the North Korean people. And so I think, if Kim were to reappear, I think that business as usual just continues. But I think it's highly unlikely that they would admit to any sort of major health outlier having taken place. Because you don't want to, if you're in, as I would say, unstable a position as Kim Jong-un is, you can't show weakness. You have to continue to demonstrate your deity-like position as the head of North Korea.
All right. So the second scenario they say is that he remains unseen and potentially incapacitated for longer. So let's say we don't know anything for the next 8 weeks. What's going to unfold in those 8 weeks? What kind of unusual activity would the U.S. and South Korea be looking for?
I mean, I think there is a huge need for both the US intelligence and South Korean intelligence to be cooperating and sharing information and pressing as hard as possible to try to get information on the health of the leader. In terms of what happens internally inside of North Korea, what would result from, an 8 weeks departure for Kim Jong-un, I'm not exactly sure. It depends on the health and also the loyalty of Kim's upper echelon to him. One of the black swan scenarios that North Korea watchers always consider, of course, would be the death of the leader, but also the possibility for some sort of internal coup at the upper echelons, because individuals who are immediately surrounding Kim Jong-un often are given access to information that no one else in North Korea has access to. And so if somebody maybe got it into their head that they were going to be the next supreme leader of North Korea, you could see some really interesting intrigue taking place where people are jockeying and volleying for positions